humanitarian organization, Gift of the Givers, which we know is doing absolutely superb work, subhanAllah. He holds a master's degree in counseling psychology from University of KwaZulu-Natal with a profound focus on mental health. And Brother Muhammad specializes in addressing various mood disorders, particularly different forms of depression disorders and anxiety disorders. Now, July being recognized as both Men's Month and Mental Health Month obviously provides us with an opportunity to address the unique mental health challenges faced by men. So I'm very excited to talk about this topic. But before we jump into it, Brother Mohammed, would you agree with me that many men do shy away from this topic?
Absolutely, actually, the amount of, if I have to just look at stats overall in terms of my practice and so forth, you're looking at about 70% of women. My client base is basically 70% of women. I'd say 10% of adolescents and 20% men. So, of course, men don't seek that much of help in terms of psychology,
Absolutely.
unfortunately.
Unfortunately, because
Un-
if you think about a relationship or you think about a family, obviously it's not only made up of women. And women, because I think we're more emotional, we're more of that chatterbox, we're more open to speak about things, we will go forward for that. Now, I also offer sessions, counseling, and things like that. And the good thing is I deal only with ladies. So at least, I'm getting my flow of clients, right? Imagine that. Now, we're talking about a topic that is so important. And when I say if you look at relationships, if you want anything to obviously flow, there has to be a balance between both sides, not where only one is getting the help and then the other is just thinking, I'm all good, I'm fine. But I think sometimes it's the fear. And I think it's so important that we do allow ourselves to shed some light on this to say, you're normal. You're only human. The Anbiya alayhi salam went through so many tests as well, and they felt the emotions, and there's so many things that we can learn and draw from. So brothers, you two are human just like women, and it's okay. So we're going to delve into mental health with men. Can you explain with us how mood disorders and anxiety manifest differently in men compared to women?
Okay, so we first need to understand that let's just speak about depression, right? Um, what I've noticed is that a lot of women that come through with depression obviously report the normal symptoms of sadness, worthlessness, excessive guilt, change in appetite, sleep patterns, and so forth. However, there is also a large amount of men that would experience that. However, on that note, when it comes to men display a lot more anger. So they exhibit irritability, anger, aggression more than the sadness. They're
Right.
also more likely to engage in risky behaviors and substance abuse. Uh,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
on that note, this is obviously just a generalization, not to say that only men only will only act out in anger and women will only act out sadness. There's a bit of both, but there's more men that exhibit irritability and anger rather than women. On
Right.
that note, there's also something called high functioning depression, where men and women both experience this, especially in corporate environments. I've noticed that quite often, where men and women are just on overdrive all the time, and they're just going and going and going and going until they end up with burnout.
Correct.
So that's also one of the symptoms or signs of depression that both men and women exhibit. Yeah, overall, I'd say.
But that's true. Men will mask it. And I think it's so important until you stop, you reflect, and you say, what's going on? And, people will turn to substance abuse. Why? In order to numb that so that we don't have to go within because it's painful to go within. And then, of course, Allah Azza wa Jalla says, I will not change the condition of a person until they change what is in themselves. And the question is, how brave are we to do that, right? Because that means ownership, that means responsibility. That means taking that personal sense of accountability. So let's look at some of the common symptoms of mood disorders and anxiety that men might overlook or attribute to other causes in your observation and professional advice.
So some of the symptoms specifically with mood disorder, right? With your depressions, all different types of depression, bipolar, and so forth, irritability, anger, physical complaints. So, a lot of times people also suffer with chronic pain, headaches, digestive issues without clear medical cause, specifically. And this I've been noticing quite often, especially even in the hospitals that I work in. Risky behaviors, as we've mentioned earlier on, fatigue, sleep issues, um, isolation, withdrawal from social interactions. This is across both with men and women. But the interesting thing is that a lot more women would be, and you can look at stats and different journal articles and so forth with regards to this here. You're looking at a
Hmm.
lot more women that are diagnosed with the anxiety and the depression rather than men. So the
Right.
simple question is, why are women diagnosed more with depression and anxiety than men? And
Hmm.
the answer is that a lot of the time
Good.
men goes unreported. So a lot
100%.
more women, as we started off, a lot more women are seeking help, and men, the stats just don't link up in terms of the amount of men seeking help and diagnosed with anxiety and depression and so forth. So yeah, that's one of the things, that men are less frequently diagnosed with disorders because it's underreported. You're going through
Yeah,
something, you rather turn to the I'd say maladaptive coping mechanisms or the negative coping mechanisms that aren't good for us.
correct.
That's what we do.
Correct. And I think it's also about our social upbringing, what society will say, the grooming. Men are supposed to show up in a certain way. So they often feel I'm okay because then there's perhaps fear of judgments and so forth and things like that. And I think that's so important to break down, which could be part of the barriers. And that takes me to my next question. What would you say are the main challenges or barriers that men actually face when it comes to acknowledging and seeking help for mental health issues like anxiety and mood disorders?
So the stigma and social expectations. Um, when you look at stigma specifically and so let's start first with the social expectations. Men are often required to or perceived to have a certain role in community, in the household. They according to cultural norms, they need to be in charge of every single thing. They need to have control of every single thing. They need to be the providers. They need to be everything that you can be, and if they aren't that, then unfortunately they're not seen as men enough. That's totally illogical, and it's a cultural um, understanding that we associate to what makes a man a man.
Correct.
Unfortunately, that's incorrect. And again,
Hmm.
on stigma. So in the past, and even up to now, depending on the generation that you talk to, if you say someone's going to psychology, the first thing that comes up is that this person is mad. Unfortunately, again, so
Hmm.
nobody wants to be associated with the title that, oh well, I'm going to psychology, because in their minds, people believe that should you be going to psychology, there's something really not right. That's a total misconception in terms of what psychology actually is. We also look at systemic challenges that are placed on men specifically, and these challenges are both sides, on men and women, but we're speaking specifically on men today. So when a man tells his wife or mother or sister or whoever it is in the family, not necessarily female but anyone in the family, I'm not doing well, they perceive to be as weak and not strong enough. I mean, you're a man, you're supposed to be handling these things, that's your job.
Yeah.
But people don't understand that sometimes life is really difficult, and how long are you going to be carrying that weight? To put it quite simply, when we look at it, if you're going to jump and you're lifting 150 kilograms, how long can you actually hold that? The longer you
Indeed.
hold it, the more difficult it becomes. Yes, 150 kilograms is still a lot, but at some
Indeed.
stage, if you don't get help, you're going to spasm,
Hmm.
and you need that help, or you're going to put it down. When you spasm,
Yeah.
it's even more difficult because you're going to hurt yourself, and people
100%.
don't understand that.
Mm. That's it. People don't understand. And you touched on something very important that rules and governs all of us basically. And I think also we need to break this programming conditioning now as parents bringing up the next society, inshallah, because it's all about this cultural programming, cultural conditioning, which if we just dissect it, we'll realize how it kind of I don't like to say the word, but messes us up even more because it's this conditioning that, yes, as a man, this is how you should be, as you've just explained, elaborated, and which is so true. Men will relate to that, women will resonate as well. And then on the other hand, it's like the woman needs to serve and do everything for the man, and the man doesn't have to move. So can you see this expectation that is there, and our deen yet is so different. So I think that needs to break down this whole form of cultural conditioning. And if we can just go back to our beautiful deen, follow the sunnah, it's easier said than done because it's about unprogramming, unlearning so many things. What would you say if we talk about strategies and techniques that you find will be most effective in helping men manage anxiety and mood disorders in their daily lives?
So the first thing I would always say is make use of therapy. Now, on that note, I actually missed something that I was meant to say. When what I've noticed is that when men often come to therapy, they're also ashamed, but not only by the outside system, but also their micro system, their inner system, in terms of their wives and even their
Correct.
children at times. So that's one of the reasons that men also don't go for therapy, because they
Mhm.
again belittled for actually seeking help, right? But
Correct.
in terms of the role that I would say they can take to manage the depression and anxiety. So there's so many types of coping mechanisms, and we can say, well, you know what, physical activity, mindfulness, and have a routine, and get a good support and healthy lifestyle choices. Those things all contribute to effective and positive mental health.
Mhm.
However, they don't necessarily address the core issue. They don't address the root. So
Mm.
when you actually make use of therapy, when you go to a psychologist, different psychologists practice differently. Specifically with me, I practice from a brain working recursive therapy point of view, which is also called BWRT, where we actually rewire the brain to to create new pathways for more effective, more adaptive choices.
Mhm.
We also process trauma effectively in that way. And sometimes talking is not even needed. We just need the individual in front of us to think. And while people think that therapy is going to be there for like years and years and years, sometimes you may not even need years of therapy. It may be 3 4 sessions, just depends on the
Correct.
extent, intensity rather, of the trauma and the impact that it has on the individual. So when I say go for therapy, I'm not just saying it as a psychologist, go for therapy. I mean, as a man myself, as a psychologist myself, I've been in therapy, and I say this openly, for almost 10 years now. And
Hats
it's
off
one of
to
the
you.
best decisions that I've made, even as being a psychologist, because once the trauma and things have been, and we all have trauma, once those things have been managed, what it actually does is we then work on developing the self and improving ourselves, becoming better human beings, becoming better husbands, better fathers, better workers. We start paying attention not only to our external people, but also our deen and our religion. I often hear this from people, where they come in and they say, in both men and women, they say, you know what, I'm now uh, experiencing the peacefulness that I'm getting from my salah. So a simple thing to say, well, people sometimes they come and they tell me, well, and I hear this often, I'm just reading salah because I've got to do it.
Yeah.
And the wonderful thing that I often see in therapy, and the change that comes with the individual, after a few sessions, you just hear them telling you, well, I'm now experiencing this peace. And I mean, it gives me goosebumps speaking about it alone, because we should be actually feeling that peace in salah. We should be feeling that when we're reading Quran. And I know a lot of religious scholars sometimes say, and this goes across all religions, no, pray and everything's going to go away. I mean, I've
Mhm.
done my dissertation and thesis was on Islam and culture, and how these things influence each other. And
Mhm.
again, those things are all part of coping mechanisms.
Correct.
It's
Correct.
it helps, it does help, but to experience the true benefit of what we've actually got, we actually need to clear the clutter and declutter our minds, declutter whatever's around us, so that we can see what's actually in the room and appreciate the blessings that we've been blessed with.
Absolutely. As you've been talking, that is the image that's coming through because I hear you all too well. And I also bring in NLP coaching, right? So, changing those neural pathways. And I
Right.
also use other techniques that are super powerful to help to bring about the shift. But as you said, and it's almost like if we could use another analogy, how can you find those diamonds? You have to
Yeah.
go and dig it out from that mud and clean it up, and then you have this diamond. So there's nothing wrong in going. And you said we all have trauma, and I can personally relate that I also have sessions regularly in order to keep myself in balance. And I think as practitioners and people that are helping others, you also have to get that so that you can give off, obviously, that kind of balanced energy as well. So you've touched on very important things, and I think it's so important that I just want to say, brothers, if you haven't taken that opportunity to help yourself, because remember Allah Azza wa Jal says, I will not change the condition of a person until they change what is in themselves. And I often say that I've personally understood that ayat only in 2016 when I began my personal journey, and of course then started to find myself, because you can't truly know Allah Azza wa Jal until you know yourself. And so it is so liberating, and hence you say many find that peace in their salah, subhanallah. So brothers, it is liberating. Cut off all the stigmas and obviously the whispers of society and the fears, because that will just keep you stuck and you won't be able to identify that diamond within. As we conclude, Brother Mohammed, what would you like to say as your take home message for our listeners? What would you like to leave our listeners with regarding men's health and the importance of also seeking help?
So, to all those men that are actually undergoing the different levels of stresses and pressure, you're not alone. There are many, many, many people, many men out there that are also experiencing the same and similar difficulties, just like you. Go out there and seek help. To all those women that see their husbands under pressure and trying their best, seeing their fathers, their sons, whatever it may be, go out there, support them, encourage them to actually seek help if you find that, you know what, you cannot help them. Sometimes we need to understand what is within our capacity, and if we can't help them, at least try and get them help. Rather, don't prevent them from seeking help, don't belittle them, but show that support. And in the long run, not only will they get help and they may feel better, however, it may improve your relationships, it may improve the connection that you guys have. So you're not alone out there, and Islam doesn't prevent us from seeking mental health support and going to a psychologist or to psychiatrist or whatever it may be. Just go out there and do it. Help yourself and discover the inner diamond, eh?
Absolutely. Well said. And, it's so important. I think sometimes if we are preventing our loved ones from getting the help, then it also is something for us to reflect upon. What's my fears? If he gets that help, what would that then mean to me? Because remember, we always operate on a level that serves us. And sometimes it's unhealthy, it's pathological, but there's a serve that is taking place.
Absolutely.
There's a benefit that's happening. And also, as we wrap up, I want to say that, as you said, we all go through trauma. And it's obviously how we deal, how we grow from that, who we choose to become from there. So a candle has to burn in order to give off light. And there's no shame in that. It's liberating when you say, Allah, I'm taking the power within myself in order to change my life. So inshallah, you can change it from there. Brother Muhammad, it's been wonderful chatting with you. Very important topic, I think. And inshallah, may it make a difference to men and how they perceive their own mental health and how they go forward in managing that for the benefit and the ripple effect of society as well, inshallah. Until then, Jazakallah khair for your time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And that was Brother Mohammed. He's a psychologist. His full name is Mohammed Uzair Bhamjee, chatting with us about mental health in men. I think it's so important because, hey, men, you too are humans. You too feel emotions. You too go through things. And I'm going to say hats off to all the men that actually did make that effort to actually try and help themselves, because only you can help yourself. Let's go for a break. I'll be back with you in a bit. Stay tuned. Positive Vibes with Razia Language. Urban Woman, sponsored by Vada